The HBO Limited Series We Own This City, it just continues to amaze me. And this third episode is no different, as it dives further into the investigation of the corruption inside the Baltimore Police Department's Gun Trace Task Force. Despite numerous complaints, Herschel is placed on the GTTF while federal prosecutors monitor Gondo's calls and Jenkins takes Suter along on a raid. I'm going to talk about some spoilers at the end of this, but I'll give a warning before diving into them, just in case you want to hop out before watching the episode. John Bernthal is featured less in this episode, but the times we see him, it's mainly through the flashbacks, and he's really great at showing us a progression of his behaviors, that downward spiral that led to him being arrested by the FBI. Now, in the previous episode, we saw Jamie Hector Suter investigating a murder of a man in a neighborhood. Now, I am really enjoying seeing him in this role because he became one of my favorite characters in Bosch. Now, I also know that he was in The Wire, but I've not seen all of that series. And I know, I will carve out time to binge it at some point because it is stacked with great actors, and from what I've already seen, it's very compelling. But getting back to this show, I like that the episode follows Suter much more, and his story is probably the most central one of the episode, even though there are some other characters that we do follow. The show does a great job of highlighting how Suter, along with a uniformed officer, do good police work, despite being surrounded by corruption. And this continues to speak into the showrunner's decision to not make this a show simply about police corruption. In the first two episodes, we were getting a lot of the story told to us from former members of the GTTF, who were also arrested like Bernthal's Jenkins. Now in this episode, we get to watch Allers, who's the lead of the GTTF. He's talking with his lawyer for the majority of it. This, combined with the wiretaps on Gondo's phone, are providing more of the detail to their behaviors. It's crazy to see how the GTTF can be doing good work to get the guns and drugs off the street, but then simultaneously breaking the law by pocketing the majority of the cash that they find in these locations. Now, we really haven't been shown the motivations for why they take the money, other than just straight up greed, but it certainly speaks to their inner character. Now, at some points, the story looks like part of the motivations could be from peer pressure and groupthink. Just that taunting of some corrupt officers towards the ones who aren't yet corrupt. And this tests the resolve of the individuals, which unfortunately, from what we see, most of them, they just don't have much integrity at all. I appreciate the various insights that we get into how the public sees the police in the city. This episode shows us how the upcoming mayoral election has people posturing and questioning at what the election will ultimately mean. Will the new mayor be pro-police status quo, or will they want to change things up and hold the police accountable for their actions? We also get to see how the police chief sees their job. There's just this futility in the position due to how often the job changes hands. This leaves the current chief frustrated and almost impotent when it comes to long-term authority and the ability to change anything. I'm completely sucked into the show. And I said this before, but it still holds true. As much as I'm enjoying each episode, for this one, I would really love for it all to drop at once so I can become enveloped in the story without having to take that weekly break. Because of how this story is being told to us, covering a little more than a decade of time, we can really see how the corruption that took hold just didn't happen overnight for any of the players. Now sure, some may have started out bad and then just got worse, like Herschel. I can't see that dude ever being a good guy. But for the majority, we watch the progression, just that slow ebbing away of morals to where one day it becomes nerve-wracking but very easy to just take a little off the top, especially when so many others are already doing it. This show is a great character study of corruption and the loss of integrity. And one story that begins to play out was heartbreaking for me because I really don't want a certain character to go down the path that it appears they might be. The pacing of this episode is so efficient and steady. At no point did I feel the hour drag because the content and the performances were so compelling. Now, if anything, I was bummed when the episode ends because it goes to black right before a character makes a decision, leaving us at a cliffhanger. And as much as I don't like cliffhangers between episodes that we have to wait a week to watch, I'm fully invested in the entire show. The characters, even if I don't like them, are wonderful to watch as each actor crafts players that are sympathetic, honorable, sometimes downright dirty. The case that's building is enthralling as it's meticulously told to us, showing many different angles, but also giving us the history and the background on the players so that we can be fully on board with the investigation. The show is also beautiful to watch from a technical aspect, with camera work that can create excitement, but also intimacy in certain sequences where we're meant to be right alongside the characters. There's no sex, but there is nudity, a crap ton of profanity, and a bunch of violence. Now, as a reminder, I'm holding off on my score until the finale when I'll then just give the entire show a rating. But I'm really enjoying the storytelling so far, and I really hope that it continues to impress. Okay, so now I'm going to discuss a few of the points in this episode that stood out to me, but they're obviously going to contain spoilers. So if you don't want to hear them, now is your opportunity to skip out. I appreciate you watching. Thanks for couching with me. So probably the biggest thing for me in this episode is the final sequence, where we watch Suter do the raid with Jenkins, and then he's offered the stack of cash as his cut. And this breaks my heart because earlier in the episode, we see how much of a stand-up guy Suter is, how he's done good police work by solving a murder. He's honorable, he's got good integrity, and even talks with that older lady in the neighborhood where the shooting took place, which was then around the corner from the murder that he's been working. He hears her reluctance to speak with the police, especially when something happens in the neighborhood, because when the police leave, those residents, they still have to live there, and they are afraid of what speaking to the cops could actually bring for them. Suter hears all this and is able to address her concerns, and then speak to her with the integrity of a good and honest cop. And I know this scene is so necessary so that we can be tormented and disappointed at even his hesitancy in doing the right thing with Jenkins. And this episode also does an excellent job of showcasing the downward trajectory that Jenkins is taking over time. And so much of it seems to come about because he's surrounded by corruption. And that's certainly not to absolve him of any wrongdoing. I mean, he's a grown man who makes his own decisions and throws away any integrity that he starts with. But just like in the last episode, where we see his training officer eroding away some of his ideals, we see more of that in this episode. When Jenkins shows up to the barbecue with some of the other citywide detectives, he's told, "You're promoted to citywide plainclothes and you still can't fill your pockets with money." I mean, this is some of the influence that's coming at him from the GTTF, even before he joined them. And of course, Jenkins' ego isn't going to let that go unanswered. I mean, he has to post up and talk the talk, or as we saw, he just at least attempts to. I mean, but they can also see through his facade when he mispronounces Patron. And this is just one more opportunity that they use to shame him, which continues to shape his thoughts and his behaviors. And he doesn't want to be looked down on. So the best way to do that is to become bigger, which also means for him, more corrupt. And we see this when he attacks that dude who was sitting on the steps of their house with a friend. I mean, Jenkins beats the crap out of that guy. And then when he's called into his sergeant's office the next day, he's told how to cover it up, how to write the report so that he can continue in the abusive behavior, but protect himself from prosecution. The sergeant tells Jenkins to always mention the attack, that the threat of safety can never be mentioned enough. I mean, the sergeant was explicitly telling Jenkins how to justify the assault in the report. That's then empowering Jenkins to continue with his behavior. We also get to see how the police cover their own when Steele is talking with the police union. She asks if a police officer could ever be fired for abusive behavior when it comes to arrests being made in Baltimore. The response was, yeah, a police officer could be fired for that. She then asked if it's ever happened. The response, after this really long pause, is that they are a labor union and they're there to support the members. This is a huge and telling statement. While abusive behaviors are a fireable offense, the police union's sole purpose is to support them, not to hold them accountable. This then provides the backing to continue in the status quo. Another telling moment was when it was said that the police chief had never seen a department with so few officers intent on upholding the law. I mean, that's a disgusting statement, but we also see how frustrating that's got to be for the chief. He can do his best to make positive changes, but he also said that he's probably out of the position after 1 year, which prevents him from having any lasting or meaningful authority. Now, one last point I want to address is how we learned that the $10,000 that Aller stole from the man with the wife and those two little kids ended up getting the man killed. Now, even though the dude was a dealer and somebody who was breaking the law, Allers, who is a police officer sworn to uphold the law, I mean, his criminal behavior resulted in the death of somebody. That's not upholding the law at all. And I like that we see a small break in the stoic armor of Allers when this was revealed. I mean, it certainly shocked his attorney, but more importantly, it was sort of that gut punch to Allers, letting him know that his actions have consequences far beyond impacting just himself. So what were some things that stood out to you in this episode? Were you as upset as I was about what could be happening with Suter? Either way, I'd love to hear your thoughts on the episode in the comments below. If you enjoyed this, please give it a like. Also, don't forget to share and subscribe. I'm Chris. This is Movies and Munchies. Thanks for couching with me.